A good Wednesday morning to you, Central Georgia, or a good Wednesday afternoon if you've been tuning in with me all during the overnight hours and into the early morning hours with some severe weather that we did have, but more so just some pretty strong thunderstorms that did roll through. So we're going to go over where things currently stand now as we're heading into the late morning hours and what's in store for the rest of your work week into your Memorial Day weekend, your graduation weekend, and a peek at what's ahead for the end of that 3-day weekend or the weekend full of celebrations. So let's take it over to our satellite and our radar picture. Got to wait for the graphic to play out, and there we go right there. Here's your satellite and radar picture, and I can happily report that we are all clear from any forms of strong or messy or rowdy weather as we go closer to the 11 o'clock hour. So here at 10:30, the National Weather Service has reciprocated that idea. They have given us the all clear as well. We're still left with maybe some clouds in our southernmost counties, but most of the active weather in the form of some thunderstorms that are still mainly below severe criteria is farther down to the south on I-75, moving over the Tifton area, areas like Sylvester, just south of Albany, and that line does extend. Maybe some light showers clipping the southernmost edge of Telfair County around the Jacksonville area. That line will continue to move down towards the east, southeast, and closer to southeast Georgia and closer to the Atlantic coast. So it is good news that everyone will be dealing with some beautiful images as we head into the afternoon hours, so we can welcome in plenty of sunshine like we've been seeing here in downtown Macon, and like Warner Robins and Perry have started to get some glimpses of, and downtown Dublin also now getting a glimpse of that. So speaking of which, let's go ahead and head over to our sky cams, or we just have one right there. I wonder if I can pop it up really quick. Yeah, I can get the 4-panel up here in just 1 second. If I click, well, if it'll work for me. Looks like the computer's being a tad slow right now. Bear with me real quick. Just want to give you a glimpse of the nice and sunny skies that we are finally seeing settle in all across central Georgia. And there we go. Here's our 4-panel. We were looking off at dark clouds off in the distance across all of these sky cams earlier this morning. So here's downtown Macon, where we have it facing kind of towards the south. So you can see out here in the very distance, something right there on the edge of the horizon. That's going to be the Kumho tire plant up there or down in South Bibb, rather, I should say. But still plenty of blue sky there. Plenty of blue sky, but mixed up with some clouds, maybe some occasional areas of shade at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. Some poofy, lingering cumulus clouds down here in Warner Robins, and mostly clear skies up in downtown Dublin. So it is good to see some blue sky after a very rough and eventful morning and overnight hours. We did continue to see plenty of flashes of lightning, even saw one strike not too far away from our sky cam down in Warner Robins this morning. It was definitely a sight to behold, but obviously something that you definitely don't want to be outside near whatsoever. So hopefully many of you heeded the warnings that we did give you throughout the morning hours, and your morning commute was nice and smooth sailing, and you did take it a couple minutes slower before making your way out to work. Temperature-wise, mid to upper 70s. Now that we have some sunshine, we'll try to warm up ever so gradually. However, not going to quite warm up as quickly as we have as of recent days. The dew points, it is still muggy out there. We haven't quite seen that cooler and that drier air usher in just yet. We will see the drier air usher in later on this afternoon in central Georgia. However, the cooler air, not necessarily. That's going to hold off for a couple of days, and I'll show you why in just 1 second. Here's a look at your feels like numbers with the humidity still being present, feeling well into the 80s in some areas, 82s or 84s, and still maybe a little bit truer to their values where you are seeing the areas that just got out of some of those rain showers and some of the low-end thunderstorms. The winds are already building back into the forecast, however. This afternoon, it's going to be a breezy one, and tomorrow afternoon, after the passage of this frontal boundary, we will see these winds starting to filter in from the west. And that's why we are seeing some occasional gusts even up to 16 miles per hour down in Vidalia. And we'll see plenty of this yellow shade, maybe even some spots of some red on this wind and wind gust map, indicating some winds up to about 25 or 30 miles per hour later on this afternoon. Here's a live look at that satellite and radar I did just show you. Wanted to lead off with that because obviously the all clear being the most important thing to talk about here as we get closer and closer to midday and to lunchtime. So we do still see showers lingering around Telfair County, down on the southern edge of Montgomery County. They will be fairly quick to move out of the picture, at least over towards the east and the southeast. This frontal boundary itself has not been too fast, at least guiding these storms from north to south in central Georgia. I think we started getting warnings pop up somewhere around 3:30, 3:45 in the morning in our northernmost counties, and now just now getting these out of here about maybe 7 hours later here at 10:35. So it has been a very long morning, and I do appreciate you all for bearing with me through all the coverage, the morning show, cut-ins, just kind of staying up to date about what it looks like before you venture outside this Wednesday morning. So here's a picture across the entire state of Georgia. We are seeing some clouds, more so scattered in nature, up here in the northern portion of the state. This line, this frontal boundary, continuing to push down through the deep southeast, and kind of the leading edge of it going to be on the backside of this cloud cover right there. And this isn't up to date. I did draw this as of this morning. So take this frontal boundary, move it a little bit over to the right, move it down to the south a little bit, kind of take it along where you see that line of cloud cover and that line of rain along the Gulf Coast of the United States. But back here is what I was talking about a little bit this morning, this secondary frontal boundary that is going to trail right behind the one that did sprout all of our active weather this morning. It's not going to do anything in the way of rain chances per se. However, it will do something very beneficial for your forecast for the first part of the weekend. So we'll talk about that and the kind of the difference we're seeing between the two as we go throughout the next couple of days. Yesterday we got to the 90s, so a high temperature of 90 degrees, a low of 68. The lows this morning, most of them didn't even get out of the 70s until you got some of the rain to come through. Most of the lows this morning were hovering around the upper 70s. Some areas even felt like the 80s during the coolest portion of today, giving you an idea of why this storm and why this line was able to hold together a lot better than what we were thinking that the models were indicating as. Because we definitely had plenty of semi-warm temperatures. They definitely weren't 90s by any means, but upper 70s that were feeling like the 80s. That shows you that we definitely had enough moisture content at the surface. So the system definitely had enough to work with in terms of lift. Obviously, it's a frontal boundary, so ahead of it, you are going to get a lot of lift. And we had plenty of moisture at the surface, so that was continuing to lead to the activity and allowed for that line to hold some organization as it moved farther down to the south. So 87 degrees was the average high yesterday. So we did fall above average once again. I think it's the second day in a row, and in fact, that we've hit 90 degrees up here in Macon. Did feel a little bit warmer, but thankfully not this warm. 98 degrees back in 1962. 43, definitely not that cool. Back in 2007 is when we set that record. No rain was recorded as of yesterday. However, I do believe that we are going to continue to see this number climb after we get the readings from today's almanac later on this evening. Hopefully get us back closer to the inch mark. Then we can go on a good dry stretch without receiving any rain, and we will be okay. We will continue to see this number trend above average. Sunrise at 6:33. Sunset at 8:30. That was the sunrise and sunset times yesterday, maybe 1 minute earlier this morning, and maybe 1 minute later as we go into tonight. But something I do want to mention, because we haven't really been able to see the sunrise as of recent days. The good news is I think we're going to be able to see it set in spectacular fashion later on, heading into about 8:30 later on this evening. So for today, the storms are moving out. Actually, I will say confidently that they have moved out. So we're going to have to change all these thunderstorm icons on our 7-day forecast, put nice and sunny skies for the rest of the day. This is what you need to know for the rest of your Wednesday. We will see the drier air continue to filter in. Obviously, hasn't really made it here so far, but when I show you the humidity levels, you'll see the timing that drier air will come from the west, and breezy. Already seeing some breezy winds, some occasional gusts up to 15, 16 miles per hour. They are going to take it a step above that. Maybe even some gusts up to 25 or 30 miles per hour throughout today. This is a quick moving frontal boundary, and with that swift and quick motion through many areas of the country, that's what's going to continue to move some of those gusty winds into the picture, and they're still going to remain in the picture for most of tomorrow as well. 89 for a high temperature, so basically feeling the same as yesterday. 89, 90. I know one has a 9 in the front, and I know one has an 8 in the front of that number, but they virtually are the same number, feeling pretty much the same, with the exception of today actually going to see these numbers feel true to their values. Take a look at this heat index map. Now, these are still warm values, don't get me wrong whatsoever. but it is nice to see that the highest that we feel like is still going to be 89 degrees during 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon hours. So it's going to be a bit of a drier warmth as opposed to a more humid air that is making that temperature feel a little bit warmer. And then we will see these temperatures still feel like the 80s and dip down into the 70s as we're going just past sunset. So here was a look at your day one storm outlook. Kind of just want to show you this to recap what we saw in terms of that severe weather. Areas like Huntsville, Alabama, and up here into this level 3, that was where the greatest confidence did lie of seeing some severe weather. And I believe this did actually extend up into areas of Huntsville and Nashville. They did trim some areas off as they had already seen their impacts a little bit earlier. But the consensus was northwestern Georgia was going to see more severe weather than we were going to see down here in central Georgia. So you can see that confidence decrease in the severe weather as you move farther southward. However, this morning, what we were talking about were tornado warnings, and those popped up around Butts County and moved over into Jasper County. They even clipped some edges of Monroe County and tried to get into Jones County. It doesn't look like anything was necessarily confirmed on the ground, at least with that. We did see a potential debris signature up in Butts County, moving over into Jasper County. The National Weather Service team is going to get a survey down there probably over the next day or so. They might even be able to get down there as soon as today, with this area kind of being fairly close to Peachtree City, as opposed to when a tornado happens, say, somewhere in Wheeler County or Dodge County. It takes them a little bit longer to travel down I-75, get all the way over here into the bottom of central Georgia, as opposed to just maybe crossing I-75 to take a look at the damage reports that are there. But we didn't receive too many damage reports. The EMA directors up there in those counties were actually pretty active in the chat this morning. I don't think they had a lot of calls about any potential damage, maybe a couple of trees that have been down, maybe on a roadway, some power outages, but it wasn't anything that was necessarily really widespread. So that is a very good thing. And then we continue to see that severe weather threat decrease as you go farther south. We did see a severe thunderstorm warning pop up in Hancock County very briefly, but it was on the very northeastern edge of the county, and that warning did sprout right as that kind of bulk of the storm was moving out over towards the east. It was really just these 4 areas right here that did see the severe weather warnings this morning in the form of a severe thunderstorm and a tornado warned storm. However, the thunderstorms did continue to hold together in terms of organization. That line was almost continuous until it got kind of where this level 1 area does end. And then that's when we started to see that line break apart. Some areas of rain just getting a lot lighter in nature, not necessarily thunderstorms per se. But there were their fair share of gusty winds, definitely some heavy downpours that we saw on the sky cams in Warner Robins, Perry, downtown Macon, and also frequent lightning. Then that probably was a bit of a rude awakening for many of you, as this did pass through a little bit before the alarm clock usually goes off. However, it is something that I'm hopefully very thankful for, that you did tune into everything we were covering throughout all morning long. And even strong thunderstorms can still have impacts, whether they are a severe thunderstorm or even get into those tornado warned storms. Something I said a lot during the coverage this morning was it doesn't matter really how a tree necessarily falls, whether those winds are rotating or they're straight line. The tree is still going to fall, and the tree is still going to damage things that it does fall on, whether that's houses, whether that's other pieces of property, or whether that's power lines. So obviously, just take any kind of severe weather risk or warning that you do receive in real time very, very seriously. But I'm hoping that we continue to go throughout today without seeing much reports of damage. I'll continue to keep an eye on the National Weather Service chat and our EMA directors for any reports of that. Overall, it was just kind of a messy morning as you made your way out and about. And obviously those severe warnings, that's something we were continuing to look at too. So this is your day 2. Yes, this is the day 2 outlook. So I did update that day 1 outlook. That one has expired, that one I just showed you, but I did just want to show you the areas that were in a level 2 and how that corresponded to some of the severe warnings that we did receive. This day 2 outlook doesn't have any of us in the entire southeast besides the state of Florida really within that, but I did want to highlight the risk that areas down in south and southeast Georgia are going to be under a level 1 today, not us here in central Georgia. That's the new day 1 storm outlook that will go for Wednesday, so I'm going to have to do some tinkering around with that graphic to get the other image of yesterday's outlook out of there. So that zooms in on central Georgia, shows you that there is a whole lot of nothing for that severe weather risk. Let's go into future view, and Now I'm actually going to go back to using our future view graph model right here, where you'll continue to see these gusty winds building into the forecast. But now that the rain is out of here, just going to be a predominantly windy and a sunny afternoon into your evening. So for any plans that you do have to go out tonight and such, may want to put the hat on or such, or just know that it's going to be pretty breezy and make for a bit of a bad hair day. Maybe not the best night for date night if you're not wanting to have one of those bad hair days later on tonight. We see some occasional high-level clouds, but overall, Thursday is trending dry. This is all the way through 6 p.m. Tomorrow, still looking good to go, and still a bit breezy with these wind arrows that are fairly long and starting to be a little bit yellow in color. Then we get into Friday. Friday, once again, the morning is trending dry. And then there is the possibility right now, according to this run of Future View, some passing clouds could produce a light shower or a sprinkle or such, but then we clear out as we go into Friday night. And that will take us into Saturday. So the second day of your long weekend, or your weekend that is going to have many graduation festivities, kind of the perfect storm with everything. I think typically most areas in central Georgia do graduation around the time we get into that Memorial Day, that 3-day weekend. So that is setting up to be a beautiful forecast, and there's some things we will talk about as we head into that. The first of which will be the winds this afternoon. This is what I meant, about 25 to maybe even closer to 30 miles per hour if we are getting some of those red shades. Quite a breezy afternoon and evening. They will go away a little bit as we go into tonight, into the first half of tomorrow. Then they will build back into the picture. Not quite as gusty as today. However, we will still maybe see a gust up to 20, 25 miles per hour. Maybe just more of a breezy day tomorrow as opposed to being more so gusty later on today. And then Friday, they're not really going to be a factor whatsoever. But let's talk about that humidity. That's probably something all of you are wondering. When will this dark green and this swampy air finally get out of here? It is way too early for that. That is something for June, July, and August. Good news. Hold off for a couple more hours and bye-bye to the dark green. We even see some shades of no color whatsoever, and then we are starting to build some patches of drier air in. Not very widespread. We still see some flashes of that light green, but all of the dark green is going to be down to the south today. That's going to be ahead of where that frontal boundary is. And then we do see some fluctuation, that humidity trying to build back into the forecast as we go throughout Thursday, maybe on into Friday. Nothing too impressive whatsoever. These are still just barely some dew points up into the 50s. You might notice it a little bit as we get closer to 60 right there. But take a look at what happens on Friday, more so Friday evening. We continue to see that dry color, that no color area filter in down from the north to the south. Remember that secondary boundary I was talking about that's up to the north and the northwest of us right now? That is actually going to be that frontal boundary. So it's going to provide us with a reinforcing push of that cooler and that drier air. Emphasis on the cooler this time because we're not seeing much temperature change over today and tomorrow. However, we are getting some drier air later on today that will make temperatures feel a lot truer to their actual numbers. Well, this secondary boundary is actually going to do a little bit of both. Bringing back that drier air a lot more widespread in the northern half of the state as we go into the first part of Saturday. We'll play it all the way to 3 a.m. as long as this future view does go. Most of anywhere of the noticeable humidity is really in the southern portion of the state, getting down to Florida, the Gulf Coast states. So that is looking very good and very promising right there. But how about those afternoon high temperatures? What's going to happen with those? And it's not much of a relief. It is still technically cooler, but 83 and 86 still going to be pretty warm afternoons, but finally going back below average of 87 for this time of year. However, you see just as quick as we are to cool down is going to be how quick we are to warm back up, back into the low 90s possibly on Sunday. And then we look at the humidity to start to make more of a return into the end of the weekend, but not technically the end of the weekend. Most people off of work on Monday, heading out of town and such. So not necessarily, I will say this is the second half of your weekend, I guess, for this 3-day weekend, but still 92 for Sunday. It is possible right now. We'll see that number fluctuate a little bit. Maybe we can keep it below the 90s as we get closer and closer. How about your morning lows? Those are actually going to be maybe one day a little bit of an outlier. I forgot to balance the bars on here, so this morning was obviously very, very warm. 60 degrees, walked a little past it, 60 degrees for Thursday. So going to see a temperature drop finally closer to the 60-degree mark tomorrow morning. 61 on Friday, but then after that secondary boundary comes through later on Friday, that's what's going to drop maybe our morning lows down into the 50s for one lone morning, and then maybe hanging around closer to 60 degrees for Friday, Sunday, on into Thursday. That average low you see up there, 62 this time of year. So the only day that we may be falling below that would be that one day, Saturday morning, where we drop down into the mid 50s. So we are about 20 minutes right now. Going to recap what's going on for your weekend ahead so far for any people heading out of town, heading back into town later on as you go into Sunday and Monday, and obviously for any outdoor plans that you may have. This is Saturday, at 6 a.m. We see one model trying to hint at rain getting pretty close to us. Doesn't necessarily look like there's a high confidence that it is going to rain necessarily on Saturday. I think you're looking good to go for outdoor plans on Saturday. We go into Sunday now where rain is all around us. I wouldn't rule out maybe seeing a scattered light shower or two as we go throughout the end of the weekend, Sunday at 6 p.m. And then Memorial Day Monday. Rain is trying to creep in. This is only what one model says. As you see, the GFS in green is holding all the rain to the north and the northwest of us. So we could see rain start to creep into the vicinity of the southeast and central Georgia, but maybe you're heading up to North Carolina for the weekend. Heading back through South Carolina, you're probably going to run into some rain. So be sure you're paying attention to that forecast before heading back on Monday, especially if you're really traveling anywhere, I guess, in the southeast. It looks to be a pretty messy picture, and we could very well see a system try to approach, kind of stall, and then that would continue to create rain chances like we've become very accustomed to as of the last month, really, the month of May, late April, these fronts stalling, creating sufficient lift around them, and then that's what's going to continue to lead to those pop-up rain chances each and every afternoon. And that goes all the way to the end of Future View, where you do see a light at the end of the tunnel. But overnight, Monday into early Tuesday, we could very well see our fair share of scattered rain at the very least all around us. And then it looks like as we go to Wednesday next week, so this time next week, we could see some clearing, but still the models past that point are very, very uncertain. It does look like we have better rain chances in the forecast for Memorial Day Monday, for the Tuesday after that, maybe if you're heading back into town or if you're heading back to work on that Tuesday. So go ahead and pencil that in for the next rain chance now that we are going to enter this dry stretch. Maybe even trending a little bit earlier into Sunday, but right now still looks to be mostly clear for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, as we will see a warming trend. But Friday and Saturday actually going to feel true to the actual numbers that I do have forecasted. So here's a look at your 7-day forecast. We do have one more thing to mention after we get through this. That 40% for the morning, obviously, we're going out of the morning now. It's more so into the afternoon. That 40% doesn't pertain to anyone anymore. The rain has moved out of the picture. A high of 89 today and tomorrow, which is going to, once again, with lower humidity, feel a lot more like the numbers that you're actually seeing on the temperature map. Then that secondary front comes through, and that's what's going to lead to a high temperature, a little bit cooler for Friday, a little bit cooler for Saturday. Still warm afternoons, don't get me wrong, but that dry air is still going to continue to be present Friday and Saturday. Before we finally go back up into the 90s, the humidity is starting to filter back in. So we have some slight rain chances, more so light showers on Sunday, getting into a 30% and a 40% for Memorial Day and your Tuesday as we head into next week. I'm more confident that maybe Tuesday next week is going to be the better day for rain chances, and then maybe could be trending a little bit later in the day for Memorial Day Monday. We'll continue to fine tune that as we head into the weekend, but something to look forward to for the rest of today and Thursday and Friday and into Saturday is going to be some mostly sunny skies. We may introduce some slight 10% chances of rain depending on what we see the model saying, depending on what the moisture content is. But as of right now, you are looking good to go for any outdoor plans. Just a reminder that this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon going to be on the breezier side. Definitely this afternoon, but tomorrow we will see a little bit of a downtick, still a noticeable breeze. And then I think our conditions are shaping up quite nice for lots of graduations Friday and Saturday, the start of many of your holiday weekends. So it is looking like a great forecast for the start of our weekend. Hopefully we can keep it together all the way through the weekend after what's been happening the last 2 weekends where we've been crowded by thunderstorms, and this morning even seeing those thunderstorms. So we'll continue to tally some of those rainfall totals and take a look at what it did for our year departure of rain, and obviously report any data to you that the National Weather Service survey teams may go out and explore up in Butts and Jasper County. Don't think those signs of rotation quite made it down into Monroe or Jones County, However, some people that were tuning in from those areas probably definitely do want to know what the latest data is with that. And that's the borderline between us and Atlanta about which counties are which, and technically they are Atlanta. But some of you, we know and we hear from you that you do watch us here on Channel 13. So number one, we appreciate that. But number two, we definitely want to give you the focus that you deserve right there, kind of on our border counties, and not leave anyone uninformed if you do watch us. Something else to look out for. Tomorrow, May 22nd, is going to be the official release of the NOAA hurricane season forecast. So that's going to give us another basis for what we're thinking forecast-wise for the hurricane season ahead. And this is going to come about a week and some change ahead of the actual start of hurricane season on June 1st. And something we have been working very hard on here on the 13 WMAZ weather team, all of our great producers and digital team behind the scenes. We do have a hurricane special that will be coming out on 13 WMAZ Plus that you can find on demand on the carousel, I do believe is what you do call that term. I'll have to do some more research about playing with the streaming app to find out exactly where it is, but that will be coming out in the next couple of days. So if you're wanting a full breakdown on everything you need to know before the new hurricane season, well, 13 WMAZ Plus is going to be your place to go. Check out that hurricane special, and we have a good little talk between myself, David Guerrero, Ansley Parker, and Ben Jones, just about what we saw last year and how we're kind of approaching things as we go into the new hurricane season. So it's been an eventful morning. I think I'm about to lose my voice. I'm going to go just get a sip of water. Thank you for tuning in all through the overnight hours and early morning hours. David Guerrero will be with you around midday, but that's where your forecast does stand. You're in the all clear as it does stand heading to the 11 a.m. hour, and enjoy the beautiful end to your work week and start to your weekend.